So you guys are in for a treat. I know this is a really important topic. You know, we constantly are dealing with the impact of COVID as it relates to maybe the clients that we serve or the communities that we're in, things like that. But today we're going to focus a little bit more internally on, you know, on our own sustainability, our own capacity, and our own ability to kind of maintain what we're doing. And to do that, we've brought in a friend of ours, Jake Lyons. He's a managing partner at Pride Philanthropy. I think a couple people on this call know Jake. He has led a couple different sessions with us before, and we're excited to welcome him back. So Jake, if you'll introduce yourself maybe a little bit more, tell us a little bit more about Pride Philanthropy, and then if you want to share your screen and get rolling, that is fine. And oh, one other thing, I'm glad that Ada just reminded me, that is, we are going to record this session, and so I have to tell you that verbally, legally, that we are going to go ahead and record this. And so if that means you want to turn off your video because we're recording it or whatever, that's up to you. But we're also going to send you the recording as a follow-up after this, okay? So just wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that. Make sure, again, you open your chat. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in there, and we'll jump to them as soon as we can. So without further ado, Jake, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Patrick. Again, my name is Jake Lyons. I'm a CFRE based here in Chattanooga. I live here with my wife and my two awesome dogs, a little bit north of Red Bank here, so not too far from downtown. I work for what is essentially a family fundraising firm. My great-grandfather started fundraising back in the 1920s, and we've had kind of a small family firm ever since. So that's what I do. I kind of grew up in the business, and that's all I've really ever done. I work a lot in music as well, and I have a passion for that, but my job is fundraising through and through. Normally, I'd be kind of flying around the country working with healthcare clients and a lot of others, but focusing on healthcare in a lot of areas to conduct large fundraising campaigns and do trainings and issue certifications for CFRE. But I've done a lot of that here in my second bedroom recently, which has become kind of my office. So this session is largely the question that a lot of us have, which is, okay, obviously COVID has changed a lot of things. How has it changed fundraising? So hoping to kind of dive deep into that. As you have questions, please don't hesitate to just go ahead and ask them. I'd rather cover the questions when we have the screen and we're talking about that specifically. So you can interrupt me. I know it feels weird to just like start talking over me, but honestly, that's going to be the best way to do it. I'll try to have chat up here, just so I can get this going so I can actually see. But if I miss it, Patrick or Ada, if you guys could just let me know. And if you guys have questions, I can definitely cover them. No need to hold them toward the end. Even if it's specific to your organization, saying, oh, this question really only applies to us, totally fine. So the session is designed lengthwise to not quite fill the allotted time that we have today. So plenty of time for questions. We will have more of a discussion at the end as well. But if you see something that is confusing or you want to clarify or you want it applied to your organization specifically, please just stop me. Happy to do that. So let me see if I can go ahead and get this going here. Can everyone see the PowerPoint screen? Can everyone see this first slide okay? Just give me one of these if you're good. Okay, awesome. We'll go ahead and get started then. Oh, looks like we already got a chat. Let me see if I can pull this up here. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so if you're from a small nonprofit, it is likely that these are the most focused on types of fundraising, especially pre-COVID. So we have grant writing, special events, and direct mail. These are kind of the bread and butter of small nonprofits. There's quite a few small nonprofits in Chattanooga. It's a very philanthropic community. Just kind of the culture is that part of the draw of why I love living here. We know that these are some of the most difficult ways to fundraise as well. And we've seen education specifically and religion, the two biggest powerhouses in philanthropy, slowly move away from these over the last 2 decades. What COVID has done has really accelerated our shift with a lot of our clients and the people that we work with sort of away from these things. There are a place for all of these in fundraising. We'll kind of go into a deep dive of each of these, but we know that they are complicated, they are time consuming, and they don't yield necessarily what we want. When I say grant writing, let me be very, very clear on this. This is not government grants. We do understand that many nonprofits that are small, when I say small, between 100,000 and 1 million gross receipts a year, still considered small. rely on government grants, that is not the same as philanthropic grants. What I will be addressing specifically is, oh, we're writing this grant to a foundation which has a board which decides, X amount of dollars that's given away per year. So grant writing specifically for philanthropic grant writing. Special events, this is when we're holding a fundraiser. We're having a gala, we're having a walk, run, 5K. We're doing all those things that, it takes 6 months to plan, and then we raise $60,000 in a day, and it's a big hooray. And then direct mail is like your annual appeal. You buy a mailing list, or you have your own mailing list, and you mail out, 1,000, 2,000 letters, and you get 0.5% of them back with a few checks. So those are kind of the traditional bread and butter ways that we do it. We know that peer-to-peer fundraising has become more popular. It's easier for religion. You get the weekly experience, or those of you who attend church have that weekly experience, or eventually after COVID, where we sit down together and there's an altar bucket that's passed around, or a tray that you're giving weekly. It's very easy to engage with donors in that way. For education, it's difficult. It's more difficult. So they have these massive development staffs, like over 100. My alma mater, University of Georgia, has, I think, just over 100 full-time development staff whose job it is to fly around the country and talk to donors one-on-one, and they get 90 to 95% of their income in that way. And they bring in, I think their last campaign was $500 million, very successful. So our goal as smaller community nonprofits is largely to say, okay, we know that religion and education have surpassed healthcare, community nonprofits, social services, all those things tremendously. It's been slow since the 80s, but in the last 15, 20 years, they've really ramped it up. What are those industries doing that are so effective? And how can we adapt this and take advantage of the fact that, okay, COVID's changed fundraising anyways. What can we do to kind of model ourselves after those big players who are doing so well with that? So we're going to kind of dive into each of these really quickly, and then we'll kind of circle back and talk about what are the things we actually can do that are actionable. I would love for you to walk away from this today not going, oh, that was a neat little session, I learned some things, but to actually say, okay, I actually have some specific to-dos that I can put on my list today, this week, next week, that will make a tremendous impact in terms of our philanthropic revenue moving into the next couple months. We know that the next 3 months are going to be absolutely critical for all companies, nonprofit and for-profit alike, but there's some pretty specific things that we know we need to be doing right now to make this happen. I work for a couple nonprofits just as kind of a side thing, and we're already ramping some of these things up already because we know that after Q1, which saw one of the biggest economic downturns in the last 100 years, that we have to make some pretty substantial changes in the next 3 months to make sure that we come out 2020 at least break even. So let's get into this. So again, philanthropic grant writing, not the same as government grants. We know that is a huge source of revenue for a lot of nonprofits. This is specifically for foundations or family trusts or that kind of thing. So often these are difficult work and time consuming. Just give me one of those little yes or no's. How many of you have ever actually gone through the process of writing a grant for a foundation? Just so I can kind of see a percentage here. Just click, raise your hand or a thumbs up is fine. You can click the little yes or no, also good. So yeah, quite a few of you. So I don't have to tell you, this is obviously a very, very difficult thing. It's not hard or necessarily tedious, but it's time consuming. It's work. You will spend hours doing this, hours that ideally you could spend talking and cultivating with large donors, guaranteeing a gift. So we know it's hard work. We don't necessarily want to be doing this. It requires research and writing skills. I know talent development is one of the biggest challenges for nonprofit work. Those who are in development roles for nonprofit stay an average of 18 months. That was the 2019 numbers. 18 months is the average. So half of all nonprofit workers who are in fundraising spend less time than that at their job. So they're trying to get turnover, and I'm sure you guys are laughing because you're like, oh my gosh, yes, this is exactly the problem that we're having. Trying to get turnover for people who are very, very qualified writers and researchers who are just great at doing grants. They're hard to find. That skill set is underpaid, and the people who are talented and can do those things are going to get a job doing something else. So it often falls to you, the director, or you, the sole fundraiser of your organization, to figure it out. It's difficult, it requires skills, and it doesn't always have that yield. It's not sustainable as a singular funding source, no matter how good you are. Say you have this absolutely fantastic grant writer, that's their only staff, that's their only job, they spend 40 hours a week writing grants. there are not enough grants locally to support your ongoing operations, especially if you're a medium, small to medium-sized community nonprofit. It just won't happen. So you could spend all of your time, you could hire 6 people to do this, they wouldn't even pay for themselves. Which is unfortunate. Not to say that there isn't a place for this, and if you have the ability to occasionally do these, or you have a grant that just really aligns with your mission, you know that you can get an in on that, that's fine. But to do this full time is just not feasible financially, and we know that. Grants can be designated to a specific project. So say you write a grant and you get the best news you can. Hey, yes, we are going to fund your such and such, but we are requiring that this money go to X. Our foundation supports X, Y, and Z. We are very passionate about X, Y, and Z. So by giving you this money, this is a donor designated dollar towards this project. That may not directly align with what mission that you have or the projects that you have, or even your needs. You may say, oh, this is our priority for the next 6 months as an organization. They say, well, we kind of want to fund this other project. We're going to give you $100,000 over the next year, but you have to spend it on this. And you go, well, that's not going to work. That's not even going to, we're trying to fund for operation here. We're trying to survive. That's not going to work for us. So to have that specificity sometimes kind of handcuffs you a little bit and allows you not to be able to do that. And the last is no guarantee to work. That's the biggest bummer about this. It's like 2 inches away from gambling, or it feels that way because you say, okay, we could spend this many hours researching this foundation, talking to the board members, getting information, learning about their mission, reading on their website, design this beautiful grant. We send it in, we wait 3 months or a month or however long it is, and we hear back you were not selected. We're like, oh, that was so much time that we spent, and we got literally nothing. What we got is a bunch of wasted staff hours. Maybe we have this grant, but we can't really even apply this to the next one because we have to rewrite the next one to be custom for the next foundation. So we know that this is a way that people go into this and say, okay, we're just going to write more grants, but it's just too difficult. And we know that if we have to focus on a few things, this is not one of the things that we can focus on. There is a place for this in fundraising. And if you have 2, 3, 5 development staff, maybe you dedicate one person's half of one person's time toward this. But if you're a single shop, or you, the director, are responsible for your own fundraising, please do not focus your time on this. We'll talk about some of the ways you do need to be spending your time just based on the data alone. But if you are a small shop, small development staff, this is not where you want to be spending your efforts. Questions so far before I go on to the next one? Obviously, type in the chat. You can unmute your mic, all of that. Awesome. Okay, special events, everyone's favorite. This one is kind of interesting because it got kind of canceled for us. A lot of events were planned, and I'm sure all of your nonprofits had an event that was, over the summer or even in early fall and has been canceled. Just either show of hands or yes in the chat box. How many of you had an event that is already canceled, that was planned and is no longer in existence? Yeah, so yep, a lot of you. Us too, same kind of thing. We know that special events are time consuming. One of the things that people talk about with special events is a lot is, oh, we raised X amount in one night. Yes, Nancy, postponed to modified. Yeah, that's another. We're actually going to talk about that too. Great option for ones that are delayed into the fall, how we can kind of adapt those. We talk a big game about, oh, we raised 60,000 one night, 80,000 in one night. But you as the staff who set up that event, was it one night's worth of work? It was not. It was months of work and months of volunteer and staff hours. So we're going to take a look at this really quick just to see, what does special events actually cost us? So the first thing is we know it costs staff and volunteer hours. If you've ever put on an event, you know it takes a lot of time on the phone, a lot of time meeting with people, meeting with venue. It's like planning a wedding. It's just an exhausting amount of work that you have to do. And it all comes down to this, and it takes a lot of hours, not just from you as the staff, but from your volunteers who are participating as well. Finding sponsors is really difficult. Let me tell you, it's going to be even more difficult in the next 6 months. The pitch of, hey, I know you are kind of struggling financially as a company, or you may be furloughing people, all the things you may be doing, but you should really support our charity, is going to be a harder sell. You're going to have a lot of difficulty in the next 6 months. Now, last year, 2019, saw the biggest increase in corporate giving ever. We had just over 2%. Corporate giving was up big. One of the side effects of having a primarily Republican government, even from the national levels, that you get a lot of tax breaks for corporations. They're sitting on a lot of cash and they're giving some of it away. So we know that was, and I'm not trying to make a statement either way, whether it's good or bad. It was just the reality of what happened last year. Corporate giving is down way more than that this year as a result of the COVID. And we know that's going to make, it's going to make sense that that's the case, and it's going to keep being that way. Patrick says many corporate giving efforts have shifted to COVID response instead of focused on organization, which is very true. So just to get the publicity, but we know corporations have to justify their giving. In corporations, if someone, even if it's a small company, if they give away $10,000, they have to justify that amount to people. They have partners or shareholders or employees who say, that was my raise or that was my bonus that I didn't get, you gave it all away. So there has to be kind of a what's in it for me mentality. So we know that finding sponsors for special events is going to be tremendously difficult over the next few months. Often there's no follow-up to event donors. So what we want is a consistent pipeline of prospects that we can ask for gifts. We know that. The point, whether you think it is or not, the point of an event is to gain new donors, to bring new people, invite people about your cause. If you don't have a specific system in place to follow up with those people, get their contact information, schedule lunches with them to ask for gifts, you're spending a lot of time cultivating prospects that you intentionally let go. And not to say that, oh, you should have done this and you didn't. It's difficult. It's time consuming. It's hard to follow up with those people. They don't necessarily feel like they have that connection if they just attended an event instead of just being invited or being actually connected to your organization in some more meaningful way. Events are hard, they're tiring, and they're usually not during work hours. Oftentimes you're working a 40-hour week, and it's like, oh, we have an event this week. This is an 80-hour week for me. I'm every evening doing something over at the venue, and then on Friday night, I'm there for 8 hours at least, and then I got to clean up until 2 in the morning, and that eats into my weekend, and it's super tiring. And development and nonprofit workers in general, being underpaid, are not always super excited about that extra hours and those extra hours of work. Don't divide your salary over the number of hours you actually work. It will make you sad. And to do this, we just have to say, okay, we know that special events are going to be a lot more difficult, a lot more challenging. So we're going to be really careful about how we spend those extra work hours. If I do have time outside of work, it's going to be very meaningful and very specific to prospecting donors, cultivating donors, stewarding donors so that we can bring in those pipelines as we would without special events. Lost opportunity costs on volunteers. So you did spend all these hours and all this time and all this effort on volunteers, and that's great. But if you'd have those same volunteers sit down with you and do a prospect session where you're throwing out names and rating and saying, let's set up meetings, I can get you in the door with X, Y, and Z donors, and you can have luncheons with them and hopefully get a gift. Those are hours you did not spend doing that. So a lot of times volunteers are super excited and they love the fun and the pomp and circumstance of an event, but you could spend those same hours and that same effort that they're willing to give you for free towards something that's going to be a lot more revenue generating. The money spent on staff hours. People say, oh, we netted this and we grossed this. A lot of times, nonprofits are not taking into consideration how many paid staff hours went into getting that event. If you worked for 6 weeks and you had 3 staff working for 6 weeks, you have to add the salaries of those 6 staff for those 6 weeks off of the gross revenue of that event, because you spent that amount of time and that amount of money paying people to work towards that event, which makes your numbers a lot smaller. You can talk about, yeah, we grossed 160,000, but if you paid 3 staff people for several months, how much does that eat into that 160 once you talk about all the food and the venue and everything else that you paid into? So not to say there aren't a place for special events, but we've seen it decline steady and steady over all the way through. We know that to be rated as like on Charity Navigator or GuideStar as like a high charity, you have to be in between like the 12 to 20% margin to raise $1. Say you want to raise $1, it's going to cost you 12 to 20 cents, and that's appropriate. For special events, you're going to start out around 50%. It's going to take around 50 cents to raise $1. That's the average, and it's very difficult to get it out from under that. So to say, okay, we got to be a little bit careful about how we're doing this, just so that we're communicating to our donors correctly, saying, oh, I gave $500 for this gala, I bought a table. How much of that $500 is going to the cause, and how much is going to my cold chicken that I got? How much is going to, talking to the sponsors and getting everything set up for the auction items or whatever it may be. So just, it's okay either way. Just make sure that you're tracking those things and you're honest about it, so that you have that information. You can share that information with your donors as well. The last thing is, a lot of times we say, oh, we can't get rid of this event, or we can't do this because it's the identity. The community knows us because of this 5K, because of this gala. Everybody loves it. What they have the identity with is the event itself, not your charity, unfortunately. You get super excited about the gala every year. They honestly, oftentimes, could not care less what that charity event sponsors or what it supports. They just like the party itself. So when the party itself becomes the identity and not your charity, not your mission, not your cause, not the important thing, that's when it becomes an issue. So just want to be really, really careful about, oh, yes, this is so exciting and this is what we're doing and everyone loves it. Do they love your charity, or do they love just doing this thing that this party that you're throwing for them, that you're spending all this time, effort, and energy doing for them? So special events, any questions or information on that you'd like before we move on to the next one?
Hey, Jake, can you talk a little bit about...
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Whoever was going, go ahead.
Okay.
Well, hey, Jake, I'll ask. So as far as special events, a lot of times they're considered as friend raising or part of the cultivation process. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So those we actually do often encourage, and whether they're, like you said, friend raising, or they are for cultivation, or they're for recognition, which is our firm's favorite type of event. Recognition events are great. You spend very little money. You get the elite people who contribute the most together about a very, very intimate thank you. Those can be very, very important in what you're doing. You have to be very careful about how much money you spend. Sometimes the best special events, even the friend raising type events, are the ones where such and such board member or such and such donor invites the top 10, 15, 20 donors over to their home just for a dinner party or for something. And those can be very powerful because you're not spending any money at all. And the people who are contributing to that are super, super excited. It's very exclusive. It's very who's who. And if that's the culture they want to be a part of, we're fine with that. It's all the money is the same to us. We don't want to apologize for that. So we're just usually all for that. We just have to kind of look at, okay, what would I normally spend both time, effort, energy, and dollar-wise to cultivate these donors one at a time? And what do I get out of a one-on-one cultivation meeting, a lunch, a coffee, even a Zoom call, versus how much individual attention can I give to someone at an event? So usually the smaller event, the better, because you can spend one-on-one time talking, chatting about your mission, about your cause, about what you're doing. The larger that event gets, the more expensive it gets, and the less one-on-one time you can spend. So as long as you're aware of those things, cultivation, recognition, and fundraiser events, all about it. Let me check the chat here to make sure that there's no questions on all this. Yes, special events, personal and high touch, absolutely. One-on-one, utilize your board members, absolutely. If we could spend the same amount of time calling on donors who do planning events, we'd get so many more gifts and larger ones. Yes, Krista, that is absolutely correct. And that is, spoilers, what we're going to talk about next. So again, same time that you would be spending putting that event together, spend the same time one-on-one with everyone you would have invited, and you'll yield a tremendous amount more money. Plus, you won't have to plan an event. It'll be great. COVID has kind of decided for us that a lot of our special events are either adapted, canceled, postponed, changed, made virtual. So what we're doing with a lot of our clients we're kind of steering into the skid, saying, okay, great. This is a great excuse. People, board members love this event. They don't want to kill it. Me as the staff, I can't do much about it because my board is super excited about putting this on every year. I use COVID as a fact to say, let's take a year off. Let's focus on big dollars, big donors, and let's go through that prospecting process. The things that are more important to us, the things that are more specific to us that are going to yield a better ROI for the year. And a lot of times we find when we pause events the following year, they don't come back, no one notices, and no one cares. So if you have more than 1 or 2 big events a year, definitely would recommend scaling that back down to at least your big couple. And if you have 1 or 2 and it eats up several months of your time planning for them, even consider taking 2020 off and using this as an excuse to take it off, and then just see how you do in 2021. Kind of reevaluate at that point. Sharon says our board members require special events for the community identity and networking opportunity, and that's true. And Sharon, that's a great point. Like I said, a lot of times board members are, we have to have this, we have to do this, and just to kind of reel them in and say, okay, how can we do this that's cost effective? That's not going to take a bunch of staff time to do this. It's not going to take a bunch of volunteer hours. Let's be smart about this, and especially with COVID, let's be safe about this and make sure that we're not spending 2 months of staff time prepping for this when we really need to be raising money. Madison says, I'm saying that special events are trending generational. Not many millennials, Gen Z give their, albeit small, designated fundraising dollars on events like galas, luncheons, and breakfasts. Definitely true. Older donors with more expendable income are more geared towards getting an experience, like an event for the donation. Yes, so Madison, that's absolutely correct. The data supports that precisely. And what we do for that is we wait until the older generations have given, basically. Say, okay, we're gonna do this event, it's a gala. Instead of having, oh, this is gonna be a gala you buy a table to, we're gonna make it a little more inexpensive. We're gonna try to get sponsors to do all of it, or we're gonna work with our board to set it up so it doesn't take staff hours. And we're gonna use that same gala as a very exclusive recognition event for our $10,000 donors and above. And say, we're gonna give that experience, but in order to give that experience, you have to be on this list of the people who are pledging $10,000 over 3 to 5 years. And if you're on that list, then that's great. Then we can afford both time, effort, energy, and money-wise to say, yes, we will be doing that event. And that is worth it for us for that cultivation. Great point. All right. Any other comments or questions, special events? We'll circle back on adapting special events for sure. That's kind of later on in the presentation, but anything specific for now. Good deal. Direct mail. Now, I will say that direct mail is declining slowly as kind of the age of the internet has growing. Online giving is not growing at the rate that direct mail is declining. So you see direct mail kind of going down at a pretty linear, with age, as older donors age out, that's declining. But social media online giving is not ramping up to meet that same demand. So the concept of non-face-to-face giving as a whole is down. We know that direct mail will still be worth it, probably for at least the next 5 years and maybe the next 10. That's not what I'm saying. That's what the data is saying. Still has a place for it in your organization. You can definitely get a return on the investment. Even if you get 0.5% to 1% back, it usually will pay for itself. It's not terribly time consuming, so we recommend at least having a place for this, but do not rely on this entirely, and here's kind of why. So either want to do this once per year or your donors will get burnt out. If you send someone 3 or 4 mailings a year to the same person asking for the same amount, you will actually get less on average than if you sit down with that person one time and ask for a gift that's bigger than all 4 mailings combined. People kind of get annoyed. They say, what was wrong with my last? I just gave to these people. What was wrong with my last gift? I'm happy to support them. But if they wanted more money, why didn't they come and talk to me? Why did they, my $100 gift wasn't good enough. That's fine, but can I not get some more information about what my next $100 gift is going to do? So you can get donor burnout. I know that's a problem that a lot of charities have, is just saying, we keep going back to those same people again, and they're kind of getting tired, and they give and they're great, but they won't do these things for us over and over. So once per year is kind of the optimum ideal. Usually we see it go out in the fall. Sometimes, if it's appropriate, you can do it twice a year, have kind of a spring mailing and a fall mailing if you have 2 specific things that your organization does. This is very contingent, very dependent on what type of charity and what type of nonprofit that you are. If you can try to dial it into one, that's ideal. If you think you just have to have the 2, it's a great return on investment. We know we're getting our money back from both the fall and the spring mailing. Great. I'd say go for it. It's not very time consuming to do that. It's not a great way to connect with donors. So we know in terms of building lifetime donors, what we want are relationships, not cash. Relationships will transform it into a lot more cash than just sending out a piece of paper and getting another piece of paper back. So we know that this is not a very meaningful touch. Our firm recommends try to get 7 meaningful touches with all your donors a year. It's tremendously more expensive to find a new donor than it is to keep one. 7 is kind of the industry average, just from the research that we've done and the research that we've heard from AFP and a lot of the other large organizations. We know that 7 per year is kind of the optimum. Beyond that, you kind of lose it, but less than that, it doesn't feel meaningful. This does not count as one of the meaningful touches that you get per year. So not a great way to connect with donors. A question from Patrick: how do you define online giving? Hitting the donate button, responding to a targeted marketing campaign, all of this? Yes. So that would be crowdfunding, Facebook campaigns. Here's an email newsletter that directs you to our website. You click donate now. Sign up for this monthly giving that deducts from your credit card this much, this often, and you get mailings from us. All of that is considered online giving. Anything that's not, I am personally asking you for a gift. And maybe you go give online. Maybe you say, I'm happy to give you $1,000. How do I do that? You say, fill out the credit card information online. That doesn't count. So this is a gift that was tracked, cultivated, solicited. The whole process was done without a human on the other end. It was all done with the computer in some way. Even if it's shared on Facebook, it's all done online. That's what I define as, or what we as a firm define as online giving. So again, not quite keeping up with direct mail still. We know that we're going to get mostly small gifts. People are not going to make a $10,000 or $50,000 decision from a piece of mail that they got. They just won't do it. We know that if people have the ability to give $10,000 or more, they're certainly going to do it with a personal visit and certainly not going to do it with mail. So not to say this isn't a great way to grow your donor pipeline, and that's a fantastic use of this, but we know we're going to get mostly small gifts from direct mail. It is difficult to recognize donors and show impact without sending another mailing. It is difficult to send recognition items, especially if the gifts are $5, $25. I mean, those gifts are great and all amounts are important, of course, but we can't spend money, time, or effort on an online gift. We know that it's more expensive than the gift itself. So we have to be a little careful about how we recognize people. And what we want is recognition. Recognition is for the donor to say thank you. It is, but it's not the primary reason we recognize donors. The primary reason we recognize donors is to draw attention to the program. We want to talk about our successes. We want to talk about the money that we raised. A lot of times, if I'm going on a call and we say, hope to consider a pledge of $10,000, and they say, yes, happy to do that. I really want that gift to be anonymous. I don't want people to think that I have the ability to give someone $10,000. And what I will do every single time is say, if that's your decision, I will totally respect that. However, if you let us use your name, it will inspire gifts of the same size among your peers and among the people you know and among others. So this, just letting us recognize you publicly will yield 7, 10, 15 times the amount of revenue that you're giving us right now. So if you are still just not wanting to do it, that's totally fine. But if you allow us to use your name, it really would make a difference. Recognition is really important for you, but it's even more important for everyone else. And most of the time they will say, okay, if it helps you guys, I'd be happy to do that. Question from Madison. I've always heard that you should appeal 3 to 4 times per year. Is that old standards as opposed to 1 direct mail to 2 to 3 online appeals? Yes, Madison, great question. That is the typical old standard. 3 to 4 times per year is kind of high. We've seen it down to 1 to 3 times per year is kind of the recommended average from the Association of Fundraising Professionals these days. And if you want to do 3 or 4 times per year, having a couple of them be email campaigns or online or Facebook pushes or crowdfunding or all those things. We'll actually talk about some of those things specifically later on today. But yes, the more you can move just a couple of them online will make a difference because you're going to hit different demographics. Those direct mail campaigns, they pretty much are going to the same demographic, the same people each time. Where if you split it up between online giving and direct mail giving, as long as you're not spending too much time on either area, again, we want to focus on our in-person asks. But as long as you're not spending too much time, you're hitting different generations, you're hitting different age groups, you're hitting different donor demographics. So yes, you're absolutely right. Great question for sure. We know in direct mail, we're not creating lifetime donors. Our goal always, when we get a new donor is for people to give to us in 3 ways. Annually, some amount. Whenever we have a campaign or something specific, we want them to give more towards that specific project. And we want them to be we want to be in their estate. We want them to give a planned gift. This is my favorite fundraising statistic. I know it's more interesting than it sounds, I promise. Over the next 20 years, the baby boomer generation through planned giving will pass on more wealth than any civilization in human history. Seriously, there's more wealth in the United States baby boomer generation right now than any civilization, any group of people ever in humanity. All that money is going somewhere over the next 2 decades. So if we don't have at least a vehicle to accept planned gifts, highly recommend that over the next couple of years, start to put that into your focus. For instance, last year, 2019, the average cash gift was $550, right? That was just the average amount that someone gave to charity. The average planned gift was $45,000. It's in a different league, it's a different ballpark. We know that the largest gifts ever will inevitably be planned gifts, and especially for small charities, they're planned gifts. Setting up a planned gifts program is complicated and difficult. What is not complicated is just having a vehicle in place to accept planned gifts. If you have a planned gift that you've received, make sure you publicize it, make sure there's an area on your website that you can accept planned gifts and you talk about that. Even just a little paragraph is fine. People say, when they're making plans with their estate planner, oh, I want X amount or X dollar amount to go to charity. What is charity? you are charity. We are charity. That's exactly where the money goes if we want it to do that. So in doing that, as long as we have this kind of robust system in place to say, oh, actually, I heard that such and such charity in Chattanooga are great stewards of the money that do. They have naming opportunities, all these things. To have that in place will be key. That's not the immediate focus right now, of course. COVID, everything else, staying alive, surviving 2020 is what we're doing right now. But over the next couple of years, just know that the next 2 decades are going to be about planned giving. So just kind of have that in the sight line a little bit for your organization. Patrick asks, how do you feel planned giving campaigns have been affected by COVID? Are families holding on to their assets or changing their allocations to prepare to support family? Are they not changing? Great question. The specific answer is planned giving itself hasn't seen much change because it's very difficult to know how much is in a planned gift until we actually receive it. Most of the time, when a charity receives a planned gift, or a planned gift expectancy, I should say, the amount's not disclosed. So I say, United Way, Chattanooga, you guys do amazing work. You're in my will. Patrick says, that's awesome. That's great. That's usually the end of the conversation. Sometimes we might sign a donor agreement, but oftentimes that donor doesn't even know how much that's going to be. They're going to say 5% of my assets. That could any kind of, I don't know how long I'm going to live. I don't know what my kids are going to need, but it's 5% of whatever's left. Or they say whatever's left after the following things have transpired, after I've paid for my preparations at the end and my kids and all this stuff, whatever's left over goes to the United Way. So we want to recognize those things, but because this is a relatively new thing, we've had kind of a 90-day spent here. Planned giving expectancies haven't really changed. People aren't pulling out of their estates to do different things, but we don't have enough data to track are those planned gifts maturing at the same rate because it's been, only 90 days. So the short answer is we don't think they have changed, but as far as we can tell, it's not been tremendously effective, but great question for sure. Patrick says, we have heard that planned giving campaigns is something of interest. Yes, absolutely. Venture Forward is looking to a future session on planned giving. Stay tuned for more info. Yes, spoilers. There we go. Again, direct mail still has a place in your organization for now. It will be worth it financially for at least the next 5 years, just based on giving data, demographics of this country, all of that. We know that at least doing 1 direct mail campaign a year, financially worth it for at least the next 5 years. Circle back in 5 years. I'll talk to you again. We'll figure out what the plan is from there, but we'll hit you up in 2025 with new information. Okay. We're going to look at some data really quick. I'm going to answer Sharon's question really quick before we get started here. Since we are currently limited to making face-to-face asks, what's the suggestion of getting gifts of $10,000 or larger? Oh man, Sharon, that's a whole other seminar in itself, but I'll see what I can do in just a couple of minutes. We know that our clients and some of the organizations that we've worked with have actually had several successful solicitations of $10,000, $50,000, and $100,000 or higher over Zoom. It is not quite the same. What we do know is if you can do it with a donor you have a long-standing relationship with, it is a lot easier. Meeting a new person, kind of creating a new relationship over Zoom is very difficult, as you know, but if it's someone that you've known for years and they've been kind of an ongoing supporter, sitting them down over a video chat and talking about, hey, would you consider this pledge for $10,000? We can accept it over the next 36 months at any rate that you feel is appropriate. That's fine. And we've seen actually pretty good success across the country with that. We also know that if there's a way to meet socially distant and safe, if you say, oh, let's wear a mask, let's sit outside at a diner and I can talk to you there. We've had a couple of success stories in that area as well. So primarily over the last 3 months, we've been in kind of like change survival mode. Let's get back on track with campaigns. So we've spent most of the last 60 days with our clients prepping for ramping up campaigns in the fall. So we say, okay, we have this time where we have to kind of stay in our bunkers. That's fine. Let's use it to make a really, really strong plan moving forward so that even when it's the least bit safe and things are beginning to open up, we have this whole force of volunteers and we're ready to go with our campaign starting August, September. But yes, great question, and definitely a question that's on everyone's mind. So just some data recently. We don't have a ton of data on COVID fundraising because it's all new, but luckily there's several philanthropy organizations, national organizations that track this kind of thing. So here's what we do know. Lending Tree surveyed 100 adults mid-June just to kind of see about giving habits. 63% of them had unchanged giving patterns. So 63% said, COVID's not going to affect our giving. We give where we give. It's fine. 15% says they've paused donations. They plan to continue giving, but they're just going to take the next few months and just kind of wait out the storm in the stock market. We know that is the primary indicator of giving as a whole. So they're just going to kind of hang tight and see where everything settles. Not that the economy is this or that, but because it's so volatile, people are just being a little more cautious, saying, we will give, we do plan to give in 2020, but we're just going to see how the fall shakes out before we go in and do that. Only 5% decreased their giving. Good news for the most part. We were worried it would be a lot higher than this. It hasn't been. There's several other studies that support this data as well, but we know that not a lot of donors are completely decreasing or getting rid of their giving as a whole. Oops. 6% actually increased their giving. I don't know why this is. A lot of times giving is just kind of up and down and all over the place. This could be, backing COVID specific campaigns. It could be for a lot of reasons, but this is just the straight data that we know about, what are donors doing now, midsummer, quarter two. Another survey that give.org, another large organization, surveyed quite a few people. 30.8% of donors in their survey intend to give more in 2020. Good news. And they may change the way that they're giving, but we know that those donors are out there. And 52 intend to give the same. So we know that leaves a small percentage of those who are not going to increase their giving or not going to keep their giving the same. But it's not as much as we think. Say we had a $3 million or a $5 million campaign and we say, oh, now we can only raise 4.8. That would not be cause to quit. We would say that sounds fine. It's a little less than we were expecting, but if we can still raise 4.8 million over the next few years, we are certainly going to try to do that. That's definitely worth our time. It's a little bit less than we were expecting, or say it's going to be a harder road to get to that $5 million number, but it's okay because we know that the data supports people are still out there giving, and it's still, for the most part, it's fine. Here's an AFP survey. Association of Fundraising Professionals did kind of their own network. Charitable giving was down 6% in quarter one. That's the highest or the lowest drop, the biggest drop that we've had since 2008. Basically, we know that was big. Quarter two numbers are not fully in yet, but the initial data is that it's back up again to kind of meet where the stock market went back up again. We know that in that quarter one, this is again just January, February, March, gifts of $250 to $1,000 decreased by only about 2%, not bad. Gifts of $1,000 or more decreased by about 7.4%. Again, this is not tremendous numbers. It will take a hit, but just to illustrate further that yes, giving is down, giving will be down, but the charities who say, okay, giving is down, this is gonna be more challenging, but we're gonna go at it anyways, are the ones who are gonna be just fine. We know that in 2008, when the stock market took a huge hit, giving was down. Giving was down for the first time since 1999. It was a long bout of giving increasing every single year by percentage and by dollars. And we can say, okay, it's down around the same amount it was then, but a lot of charities survived and that was fine. And we plan to do the same. So just to look at the actual data, this is what we know. Giving historically responds to the S&P 500 almost exactly. So when the S&P 500 is up, giving is up and back and forth. I will say, it is not as volatile. The stock market, kind of spikes up and down. Giving as a whole in the United States will follow that spike almost exactly, just not as strong. So as the spike goes way up here for the S&P 500, giving will kind of a smaller hill below it. Same thing in the downward direction as well. Just kind of loosely follow that. So if you want a prediction about how your giving is going to be over the next few months, just watch the big graph of the S&P 500. You can get a pretty good indication. I'm going to go back here. I know I've seen some questions here. Did any of these surveys share demographics of those surveyed? Yes, Mary Catherine, they did. I have actually left the links at the bottom, so if you want to dig in deeper and get some more data, all of that is available, so feel free to poke around and go through there. It was just a lot of numbers. I didn't want to go too much in and make everyone fall asleep here, but if you want to go in and look at that afterwards, you will have access. Is there any data about giving locally in the light of damaging tornadoes? Great question, Renee. Probably is the answer. I don't have it in this PowerPoint, but certainly could find that research-wise. We know that crisis giving as a whole is up. So I will say that in terms of giving locally versus giving nationally, specifically for the tornadoes or for COVID or for whatever else, we know that crisis giving is up this year. We know that crisis giving is up this quarter as well. So people are giving more towards those specific causes. The decline in giving is honestly less about COVID and more about the economy. So regardless if we see, oh, here are the challenges of us connecting with our donors or operating as a nonprofit, operating as fundraisers, we know that it's more to do with the economy being very, very volatile. So as that hopefully levels out over the next few months, we'll see giving level out as well. So if you can summarize all of this, yes, giving will change or decline, but it's also all over the place. It'll be up a quarter, it'll be down a quarter. It is, honestly, a lot of it is just noise. It will not change a lot of what we do. What it will change is what we focus on, what we prioritize, saying, okay, giving is down or it's up or whatever it is. What are the things specifically that we can do to focus our efforts and make sure that we're optimizing what we as a staff for our community charity are doing? So that's what we're going to go through next. Making sure, Patrick, I didn't miss any questions, did I? I'm just making sure here. Okay, I think I'm good. Yes, thanks, Ed. Just a reminder, both the PowerPoint and recording will be available at the end. So if you want to dig deeper on any of these stats, obviously feel free to do that. So what we can actually do, with the data, what we can actually do with this information, what are the things we actually focus on? The first is to focus on major gifts. We know that most of the money in this country given away, above 90%, depending on the year, is major gifts. And to say that's where the money is, and that's where we're going to focus our efforts 100% over the next 6 months. If we do nothing else, we're going to focus on major gifts. We're going to double down on stewardship. We're going to make sure that the donors that we do have and that we already have know that we are there for them. We're still providing, we're still moving forward, we're still working hard, we're still using their gifts appropriately. Here are the things that we're doing. We're sharing impact reports, we're connecting with our donors. Again, tremendously more expensive. I am going to go into detail for each of these, but just to give you an overview, tremendously more expensive to find a new donor than to keep your existing ones. So focus on those existing ones, keep them around, make sure that once we weather the storm, we go through and we do that. Awesome. Utilize your volunteers. We know that budgets are lean right now. They're leaner than they've ever been. In terms of what we're able to do with our staff hours is tremendously limited. That's a challenge that we face as community volunteers or as community nonprofits. We need to use our volunteers, reach out and say, hey, times are tough for all of us, but we really need your help. Here are the ways that you can support us in this time. The next is to adapt your events. We're going to go into this a little bit. I'd love to hear a little bit about what you all do with that, but to adapt those special events to be something that is safe and appropriate and will work for COVID. If we have something that we have to do in the fall, how do we set it up and make sure that it's still revenue generating? How does the visibility, how does all that work? But let's make sure we dial that in. Online giving, we talked about this a little bit. But to focus on, getting that direct mail out, but also to look at what are our avenues for online giving? What can we do that doesn't take a lot of time? We don't want to sit there and do a Facebook post twice a day. That eats up a lot of our time. It's not very revenue generating. But what are the things that we can do? What are the things that we can set up that kind of generate money on their own, peer-to-peer campaigns, that kind of thing? And then last is focus on major gifts again. I'm saying it again because it's way more important than any of the things on the screen here. If you remember nothing else, if you take nothing else away from this morning's session, please, 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 focus on major gifts over the next 6 months. It's the most important thing that you can do. So major gifts can be paid over a larger pledge period. Don't be afraid to talk about 36-month timeframes, 24-month timeframes, saying, we hope you consider a pledge of $10,000. They say, that's a lot of money. You say yes, and most of our donors actually choose to pay that however they would like over the next 2 years. You can pay it in monthly installments. You can wait until month 23 and pay the whole thing. You can pay it in 2 different tax years to maximize your benefits there. Fun fact about the CARES Act, has increased the deductibility rate for both businesses and individuals. A lot of people choose to give through their business now because that gross deductibility rate went from 10% to 25%, the biggest increase in history. So take advantage of that CARES Act. Make sure that your donors know about them, especially if they own a small business. But emphasize, yes, this is a big gift, but it does not have to be paid all right now. We'd rather count on $10,000 that come over several years than get a $1,000 gift now, every time. Obviously, this has the best ROI for the staff. There's been a lot of studies, a lot of research, a lot of data, and we know that major gifts in terms of dollars for hours for the staff is the best return. Question from Patrick: how has any of the IRS policy changes affected major gifts? It is linear with age in terms of how much it affects it. The older you are, the more likely it is to increase giving. The younger you are, the less likely it is to remain unaffected. So it's almost perfectly linear. So donors 70s and 80s, just a few percent, donors 50s and 60s, 5 to 10%, and then below that, more than that, or less than that, sorry. Yes, so major gifts will be the focus of successful charities in 2020. So charities that will be successful and will kind of weather the storm are the ones who kind of go back, regroup, and say, okay, we're doing a lot of stuff, or we were doing a lot of stuff pre-COVID. We need to make sure that we're doing the things now that actually drive the revenue and bring in that philanthropic revenue and guarantee that we have cash. Major gifts is it. A lot of times we get this. This is the first thing that we hear from our clients, especially when we're starting out. Donors of that size don't exist. Whether they say, okay, how many $50,000 prospects do you have? How many $100,000 prospects do you have? How many 10,000? They say, we don't have any of those. We have 0. And to that, here's just some short data to help you with that. Chattanooga's population is about 184,000, give or take. This kind of is all over the place, but roughly that. We know that there's an estimated, this is from the census data, by the way. You can look this up on census.gov if you're curious. And this is all just estimates as well. We'll get the 2020 census data in 2020. Estimate about 8,500 individuals with network over 1 million who live specifically in Chattanooga, who have a Chattanooga zip code, Chattanooga on their address. That's about the top 5%. We know the top 5% of all donors nationally are going to give over 90% of the dollars away. So those are definitely the individuals that we want to focus on, using our board members, using our current donors, using our staff's connections to reach those people and ask for those big gifts. Again, yeah, top 5% net worth individuals give 90 to 95% of all charitable dollars on the year. That is largely to do with the wealth distribution. Again, not making a political statement on whether that's right or wrong, just reporting the data that because of the income distribution in the country, giving has moved from about 30 years ago where it was about 80-20, 80% of the dollars came from 20%, has now moved up into the 90%, 90-10, almost 95-5. So instead of being sad about that, we're saying, okay, great, we're just going to focus on that 5% because that's where the money is, and that's fine. So just knowing that helps us know where to focus our efforts. In terms of stewardship, I talked about it's roughly 6 to 7 times more expensive to find a new donor than an existing one. National donor retention rate is below 50%. Imagine owning a business that lost 50% of its customers every year. You go out of business so fast. So why is a nonprofit any different? Why are we treating this any different? We absolutely shouldn't be. And as much as we can to focus on our existing donors to retain them is chiefly important. Don't be this statistic. Be in the half that does a lot better than this, obviously. Our firm recommends at least 7 meaningful interactions per donor per year. If you say we have just too many donors, we can't do that, it's fine. Start at the top. Who's your top donor? Make sure you get 7 interactions with that person or that couple a year, and then you work your way down from there. Get 7 interactions with as many as you can, starting with high dollar to low dollar, because you know when that next campaign or that next big thing comes around, they're going to be much more likely to give. What you want is them used to the fact that when you reach out to them or you call them, they're so excited to hear you because all you're calling to do is say thank you. Oh, I'm so excited when Patrick, the United Way, reaches out. He's always so nice. He's always so thankful for what I'm doing. So that 8th or that 9th call, when I say, we really hope you could renew your pledge, for this upcoming year, it's an easy yes, because they're so used to being excited about the conversation, the interaction. They have that trust. They have that relationship. It's easy to steward donors in that way. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. It could be a thank you call, a personal visit, a handwritten note, all kinds of things. But see if you can get 7 a year. It really will make a difference. In terms of thanking donors remotely, we know that listing on a website, social media, email, doing donor spotlights through your e-newsletters are all great ways. Record a Skype or Zoom call thanking that donor and share that video. The things that we can do digitally to kind of simulate and emulate the things that we would have done in person as much as we can. Not super expensive, not difficult to do, a lot of copy pasting with your donor list, but just keep them up to date. People will always say, I don't care about recognition, I don't care, just don't put my name anywhere until you spell their name wrong. Then you get a phone call really quick. So make sure that you're always doing that. Make sure you're thanking and recognizing people in as many places as possible. Add new donors to the cultivation list, as there are a lot of first-time givers. Let's go back to that, either the thumbs up or the yes. How many of you got a new donor as a result of COVID? Some kind of crisis fundraising, you brought in some kind of new people. Yeah, a lot of you. We want to continue to cultivate those people. We would not have reached them otherwise, and that's exciting. That's awesome. So let's make sure that we capitalize on that and start to follow up with those people so that when the next non-COVID fundraising thing comes around, because it will, that they are on our lists and they're used to getting information from us. Call, thank, and introduce yourself over the phone. It is some of the most fun days at work that I have, where I just get to call a bunch of people and say thank you. They say, you're not calling me for money? No, I literally am just calling to say we are so appreciative of the gift that you gave. Here's the awesome things we've been able to do as a result of your gift. We just wanted to say thank you. Hope I can stay in touch. That's it. And if you can get people used to those kind of interactions, and when they see your number on their phone, oh my gosh, yes, Patrick's calling. I love when Patrick calls. He's always so nice. I will definitely take this call, so that down the road when you go for that gift again, or set up that meeting to ask for another gift, it's a very easy conversation. And yes, Patrick, great point. Don't want to hide the fact that you'll be asking, of course. You say, at some point I may ask you for money, but right now I just want to talk about our celebrations and be excited about what we're doing. People love to feel appreciated individually and uniquely. Yes, Jessica, absolutely. Great point. The more that you can make people feel important and special about that gift that they've given, the easier that next ask is going to be every time. Share impact stories with donors, even privately. Again, talking about this is where your gift went and this is how you were able to do it. Great connection point. See how we're doing on time here. Utilize your volunteers. Volunteers are more likely to give than non-volunteers. I think it's like, I don't remember the exact statistic. I think it's like 3 to 5 times more likely to give than non-volunteers if they feel like they have a vested interest in your organization. So you want to make sure you're obviously going to those people first and asking them for gifts. Use volunteers to identify and open doors for new major donors. This is the most important thing. Sorry, my dog's here. The most important thing that your volunteers can do for you is connect you to that 5% of people who can give those 90% of charitable dollars. To say, I don't know so-and-so who could give a $10,000 gift to this campaign, but does anyone in the room know them? Someone says, wow, yeah, I golf with him. You want me to set up a meeting? Yeah, absolutely, love to. But to have those connections, but to be that first person connection. The number one reason people give is who asks. It has nothing to do with the cause, the amount, what you say, how you frame it, the timing. None of that matters if it's the right person who's asking. If someone comes to me and says, hey, Jake, I have this charity that I work with, I volunteer for them. My wife and I have contributed $10,000 towards X or Y. We'd love for you to join us in giving. And I would say, I don't really know a lot about that charity, but I know you. And if you're giving your time and that much money to that charity, it must be pretty important. So sure, I'll talk to my wife. We'll think about it. That actually sounds like something I might want to do. It's all about who asks. So using your volunteers to open doors, saying, I don't have enough major gift prospects. We can't focus on major gifts because I don't know enough people. That's fine. Use your volunteers. They know people. They'll be able to get you in the door with these people. Keep your volunteers busy, but ensure the work is productive. The biggest mistake we make with boards, with any kind of volunteers, is show up and not assigning out work. When people volunteer for your organization, they want to do stuff. You don't want to overwhelm them, but a couple hours a month of work is not unreasonable to ask of someone. They say, hey, here I am. What is it that you want me to do? Make sure you have an answer to that question, and that work is meaningful, productive, and actually towards the mission, either for fundraising or for what you're asking them to do volunteer-wise. And the last thing is keep your volunteers informed. Above anything else, your volunteers want information. They want information about what's going on with your organization, how has COVID changed your organization, and what are you doing to combat the challenges, where's the money going, how much money we're raising, all these things that you just talk about and think about every day. Just share that. Share that with your volunteers. They want to be a part of the mission. They want to feel like they're an extension of the staff. This is the best way to allow them to do that. Awesome. In terms of engaging and mobilizing volunteers, we'll go through this really quickly because I do want to allow a couple minutes for questions. Determine which volunteers are most available and easiest to get to. Obviously, that's different per person. Ask your board members and volunteers for their ideas, involve them. Arm them with the FAQs in case for support. So as they're out, opening doors for gifts, make sure they know the answers to the questions about whatever cause or whatever your fundraiser is. Schedule an online meeting to review details. Even a Zoom meeting is great, just to get them together once a month, twice a month. Provide consistent follow-up support for all the things that they're doing, and then also celebrate your successes. We spend a lot of time and effort recognizing and celebrating our donors. We don't emphasize celebrating and recognizing our volunteers as much. Think about the things that you can do. What are the same things that you give your donors that you can also give to your volunteers in terms of recognition and thank yous, because they're giving their time, which is often for a lot of people more valuable than even their money. So just to kind of think about how do we thank our volunteers? How do we make sure that they're as important in the same way that our donors are? In terms of adapting special events, try to aim for a maximum of one special event if you can, no more than 50% expense factor, obviously. select an event that provides an opportunity to involve a large number of people. In terms of, we're going to access a lot of people, not that we have to provide a dinner and all these things for people. What can we do in terms of a fundraiser, as Patrick was mentioning earlier? Evaluate the amount of staff time. Is it worth it for us? How many hours of staff will it take to do this? And then build a separate volunteer organization if you have to help conduct that event, saying, we have to do this gala, it brings in too much money, we rely too much on it. Great. What can we do to carve out the staff time, hand it to the board or a volunteer gala committee, or what can we do to maximize my time as a staff member to avoid having to spend time on this? Another thing talked about a lot is how to effectively convert events, whether it's do it virtual, looking for different ways for the audience to participate virtually, how they can ask questions and interact. Yes, and Chris, the thankathons are also an awesome way to engage your volunteers. So positive, so fun, so exciting. For those who don't know what that is, you just get a bunch of volunteers in a room, they get your donor list, they divide up the list, and they just call and say thank you. It's a great way that you can do one of the 7 meaningful touches a year and you can get connected to all kinds of people. So absolutely, Chris, a great idea, and we definitely highly recommend doing those. And then peer-to-peer fundraisers, for the option for people to join the team and build some friendly competition. So we know that peer-to-peer is not as profitable as major gifts, but if you have time and you can set aside and build out one to do that, that's great. Here's just a couple examples of ways that our clients have adapted their special events. They have these like non-existent galas that you get invited to. We ask you not to join us for a black tie gala event. It's not to be held on this date. And you're going to be, these are the things that you're doing. Don't spend money on a babysitter and a tuxedo and all the things that you do. Instead, give us the money, stay at home, have a good evening, and think about us. And people loved this. It was a huge success. The no-show ball, same thing. Again, you'll get a chance to review these on your own. We'll send all these out. The no-show gala and the party that never was, all these things are just like, oh, we had this event. It's no longer an event. We really hope you can consider your contribution because that was the important part anyways. Save the money and effort of actually going. And generally 70+% of people will say, you know what? Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. Or yeah, I'll run my 5K virtually and take a selfie and send it to a Facebook page. That's fine. Tiffany says we've been calling our donors saying thank you to ask them how they're doing. Yes, absolutely. Just to try to check in and saying you guys doing okay. And again, resulted in a $10,000 gift. Stories like this all the time, not uncommon, definitely a way to check and do that. Again, more information about converting events. I'm actually going to skip through this. These are just kind of singular bullets. I want to make sure that we have a couple minutes for questions, but just to kind of keep it simple, weigh your options, focus on your mission, have a follow-up. That's one of the biggest things is some system of following up with everyone who attends, even virtually. Online giving. These are some online giving platforms that have worked well for a lot of charities. If you can spend a few minutes in the beginning setting one up, it can generate a lot of revenue. Here's just one example of one I did. I started kind of a virtual music band project. We raised about almost $50,000. I did not do a lot for this to get it set up. I just kind of got it set up and let it go out on social media. We ended up getting almost 50 grand from it. That was in kind of April, May. So this is right when COVID was big and everyone was at home. But again, it's not going to be yielding enough to cover your gross receipts for the year, but it can help. I used Indiegogo because it worked for my purposes for my nonprofit, but just a lot of different options out there in terms of online giving, obviously. One more circle back on major giving. This is just kind of an exercise that we go with for all of our clients, and we have throughout COVID. It's just to go through and say, okay, who's our top 10 list? We're going to rate them on a scale from 1 to 10 on ability. Ability is how much money we think they may have or how much money they think they can give. Then we rate them on inclination. Scale 1 to 5, scale 1 to 10. How likely are they to give? I have a personal relationship with this person. I know I can get the yes. That's going to be a high score. If I don't know them or they don't have a relationship, that's a low score. Rate on access. Which is how easily can I get a face-to-face meeting with this person? If we say, oh, Samuel L. Jackson has ties to the Chattanooga History Museum, we should go ask him for money. He's got plenty of money. Does anyone know Samuel? Nope, I'm not friends with Sam. Does anyone know someone who knows someone who knows Samuel? Nope. If we don't have any access, then he's not a prospect. So just to kind of have that in the mix as well. Then you kind of score and rank, make that first call. And then get your volunteers and donors together on Zoom to do the same. Have a kind of a prospect rating session that you can do together and start on that top 10 list. Again, if we take nothing else away from this session this morning, get in, make your major gifts prospect list and get to work because we know that this is going to be the highest ROI out of anything that we do. So yeah, sorry about a little bit of rush through those last 2 slides, but again, I do want to make sure that we get everyone out here on time, 11:15, be respectful, and also get to any additional questions that people may have.
There you go. So I posted a couple things in the chat there. If you have some follow-up that you would like to reach out to Jake, I've included his email address on there, so please feel free to reach out to him. But again, we built in a couple minutes here for Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and you go ahead and ask Jake a question or put it in the chat. We'd be happy to do it that way. As you're doing that, I'm also going to launch our evaluation poll. So make sure that you do fill this out. We do take it seriously. I'd love for you to give us your feedback on today's session, and then that only helps us to make these more impactful and stronger for the future. So anyway, with that, anybody have any questions?
Patrick, this is Krista Manarino. Hey guys, wondered if anyone's had luck planning meetings with major donors via Zoom, outdoors. Just kind of curious as to what folks have been doing.
I have a quick story. If there's any others, I'd love to hear them too, but I can also address that one. Awesome. So we have a client, it's a hospital in Lake of the Ozarks. If you've seen the show Ozark, it's the hospital in that community. It's pretty cool. I actually get to go to that lake occasionally, which is awesome. But obviously they were, completely shut down. It's kind of a retirement vacation community. So being a tourism economy, they very, very much shut down when COVID happened. We reached out to a donor who had given consistently like a couple thousand a year for a while. Someone who had, definitely had the means, and we knew of them. We got him on Zoom, and we kind of said, hey, we're launching this COVID relief fund. We'd love to start that fund with $100,000 and kind of grow it from there. Here are the specific things we're going to be doing. It's going to be for testing. It's going to be for additional inpatient space. It's going to be for, we kind of laid out the things. And we asked for $100,000, and they said that they would think about it. And then they sent us a check in the mail without even following up. They just ended up mailing in a check, and we got the check, and we're like, okay, I guess it worked. I guess I said yes. So that was the most that we have gotten over Zoom. That was the most that I have ever attempted to ask over Zoom, and it was successful. So that was $100,000. That was about 60 days ago, I guess, kind of more in the middle of the lockdown.
Thanks, Jake. That's helpful. I think some of us, at least our group, has been sort of tentative about reaching out when we know our cause is very important, but we don't want to be disrespectful, or whatever the word is, for our current situation. And so we've been able to raise COVID relief funds for our student body, and just, I guess, been waiting to see when is it really appropriate to go back and say, let's focus on, Cleveland State Community College and our needs.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. I think it's completely contingent on level of relationship that you or the volunteer or whoever's asking has with that donor. I would probably not recommend doing that with first-time givers or people who you don't have any relationship at all with. But if you know that person, absolutely it is appropriate to ask over Zoom. They will totally understand. They will appreciate you adhering to the state safety guidelines. And especially if they're a previous donor, you've kind of been cultivating them already, to go ahead and pull the trigger on the ask has been largely successful, especially with all of our recent clients in the last 30 days. So.
All right, we're about time's up here. We have one more question that we can probably squeak in there. Again, make sure that you do complete the poll. That way we can make sure we improve on these sessions in the future, or continue to do them if they've been successful for you. So again, make sure that you're completing that. It's the only 18 of 28 of you have completed this. Please make sure to go ahead and do that. Any other questions for Jake?
Hey, Jake, it's Abby Garrison here with Venture Forward.
Hey there, Abby.
Hi. So you talked a little bit about galas and kind of having the ungala, right?
Sure.
I'm curious if you have any ideas or suggestions for those of us who have fundraisers who are more like luncheon type things, and that often have like a keynote speaker and like a little bit of an educational component, not just purely social. Have you seen any like good pivots for that or good adaptations? Or
Yeah, two come to mind. Both kind of similar situations, and they handled it completely differently. One did kind of a virtual cocktail hour. Said, we're going to do it instead of a luncheon, we're going to do a virtual happy hour. It's going to be at 4 p.m. Obviously BYOB. We're going to have a speaker. We're going to talk about this, and we're going to do these things. And then the other said, we're going to reschedule for November and call it good. So I don't have information on how the November one's going to go. We don't know what that's going to look like yet, but have gone 50-50 on that and said, let's do it over Zoom. Everybody can get drinks. We'll have someone talk. It'll be kind of a casual, informal kind of a deal. And it was great. It's fine.
Great, thanks.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Jake, for spending some time with us, kind of talking through some feedback and insights on all this. I hope and pray that this has been beneficial for everybody, and maybe you've gleaned some insight to help you kind of shift or pivot on some of your fundraising efforts in light of this. And again, we would love to understand, like, what are maybe your particular or specific challenges, pain points, or even desires when it comes to this. Feel free to send that to us at ventureforward@uwchat.org, and love to follow up with you around some of this. And again, if you have any specific interests in future workshops you want us to explore, please send that to us as well. We'd love to consider those in the future. Posted the calendar to our Venture Forward in the chat. Make sure you look at some upcoming sessions as well. So without further ado, thank you guys for participating. Have a wonderful Thursday, and God bless y'all.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jake.